Hey there, welcome to the Netevia podcast. I'm Moon, your host, and around here we're all about fintech, payments, and what's next in the world of business. Whether you're running a startup, scaling a company, or just curious about how money moves, we've got you covered. Let's get into it. So, today's guest needs little introduction. If you've been in the field, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I am here with Gus Torres. Welcome, Gus.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you for having me.
Amazing. I'm so happy to be here with you today and dive into all the juicy secret of your career and how you got here.
Okay.
And welcome.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And let's rock and roll.
Amazing. So, Gus, you've been one of the longest ISOs that's been around Netevia. And Vlad, how did you get started in the industry?
Wow, there's a story behind that. But it all goes back to 1998.
Wow.
And I was working for a bank in New York called Universal Savings Bank. And I was working for them selling a payroll service.
Okay,
for about a year. And we weren't able to compete against the big giant, the big companies like ADP and Payroll and Paychex, as an example. And one day we walked into the office, and the office was right around the block from Madison Square Garden in New York City. And we walked into the office, and there's these three guys in suits, right? And they say, they call us all into the conference room, and we sit down. And they go, "All right, guys, we have good news and bad news for all of you guys. What do you guys want to hear first?"
Oh my God.
Right? So of course, everybody says we want to hear the bad news, right? So we say the bad news, and he goes, "All right, the bad news is that you're no longer selling payroll services. The good news is that you still have your jobs, you still have your salaries, you still have your benefits. You're not fired." And he raised up our credit card machine, a Hypercom T7P, and he goes, "This is a new product you're going to be selling, merchant services. And today starts your training for merchant services."
Wow. And for you at that time, it was very new.
It was new.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I was mad because I didn't want to sell merchant services.
Yeah.
And
we
were all upset, right? But it all turned out to be, the biggest blessing that happened to me in my life, because
and change is never easy.
And here I am 27 years later.
Exactly. No, you have, so that means that you have to embrace change when it happens during your career, right?
Yeah.
So knowing what you know today, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
My 20-year-old self, I would pretty much say that life is long, and to trust in yourself, believe in yourself, number one,
Yeah, that's so true.
At that age, at my 20-year-old,
you doubt yourself.
You doubt yourself. I didn't
your
really believe in myself.
Still not completely.
My personal growth wasn't where it is. Nowhere near where it is today. So I would probably tell myself back my 20-year-old self to focus on growing as an individual.
Yeah.
And having goals and having dreams and aspiring for more, because anything is possible.
Definitely.
Because if I go back to when I was 20 years old, back then, my 20-year-old mindset was more about having a good time, and partying was nowhere set.
I think that's normal for a 20-year-old, but also that's peer pressure. So it works both in positive or negative aspects.
It has. There's a lot of components to it, right?
And you don't want to you want to look cool in front of your friends, and so that would also something that you would tell your 20-year-old self.
Well, yeah, and
don't compare yourself to others.
Not so much that. Yeah. I would probably say, at 20 years old, I was already living by myself. I was living in a basement apartment, right? Most 20-year-olds back then and now are living with mom and dad. Have mom and dad in your ear, right?
True.
I didn't have that at that time. I was living with myself. Nobody was seeing when I was coming home. Nobody was seeing what I was doing.
So you were you were very mature at a young age.
I was already paying rent, paying for my car, paying for my expenses. Yeah. And sometimes when I had too much fun on the weekends, when Monday came around, I only had $5 and I didn't have any money until Friday.
And then you had to go and hustle.
I had to eat eggs or tuna fish or whatever you found.
That's admirable, yeah.
Well, those are the things that,
It definitely shapes your character.
Shapes your character, yes.
So where is this journey taking you in life?
it's all about having goals and a dream, right? The reason why where I feel that I have been able to reach what I have and be able to do what I have done, and it's taken me a long time. I have not been an overnight success.
Of course.
When I first started in merchant services, I was horrible. When I was working at the bank, I wasn't doing a great job. When I became an ISO, I struggled.
That's very interesting.
Back in 2020. But the good thing is that, I was always able to ask for help and ask people who were more successful than me what they did, right?
So it's important to have a mentor and to look up to someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And back in 2000, when I went the ISO route and I left the bank, and I became a 1099, no salary, no nothing, right? I had somebody who gave me guidance, and I'm very grateful for that person who helped me.
Yeah, I think
and that company who helped me. They really helped me. I made more money my first year there than I probably made the last 3 years.
So you were surrounded by the right people.
I learned how to create a business. I learned about, I saw residual income and how it grew, and I just got addicted to it. And I can see why people in our industry, you see it all the time. People who, build a big company and then they sell and then they have a non-compete and disappear for 2 or 3 years, and then they always wind up coming back. And I understand why they come back, because
but there are no shortcuts in life.
There's nothing better than residual income, and everybody, and once you do it, and
it becomes addictive,
and you make the good money on it, and you enjoy the way you live, and you get a great payout. You're always going to want to come back and do it again.
No, it's what you're saying is very interesting, because daring to ask for help and not like seeking perfection, because like most people, like the young people, today, they just put a lot of pressure on themselves, and I think it's very humbling, and it's a great quality to be able to say, I'm not perfect at this, and let me try to find the right people to help me and have mentors. And all of the great successful people that we know, all have mentors.
Everyone has mentors, and look, Vlad has. For me, he's my mentor in my business.
Definitely.
When I started working with Vlad was in 2007, when I had just gotten back into the business. One of his recruiters recruited me. I signed up. I didn't know who Vlad was until about 5 or 6 months later. And the only reason I knew who Vlad was is because I became a top producer, because I was out there and I was writing 20, 25 deals a month, right? And that's how I got to meet Vlad. And I developed a relationship with him. I got to have a little bit more access to him. Not a lot.
But you earned that access.
But I earned that access through my production and doing the good business that I did, and which eventually led to me doing a lot of different things, right? Building a book of business as an independent, as a single agent. And then, him coming to me like 5 years later and telling me, Gus, you're going to be an agent all your life. You're going to be on the street all your life. You
found your calling.
Why don't you start doing recruiting? Why don't you start? He actually wanted me to grow, right?
Yeah.
I was happy stuck in my little box as an agent, because I was making great money. I was doing good, and he was asking me to do the uncomfortable, and doing the uncomfortable was what's best for me. Yeah. Right.
Because every time you stretch your comfort zone, you discovered a new version of yourself.
Yeah.
So how did you overcome that fear of growing? Because every time there is something new that requires a new version of ourselves, we feel like a little like holding back. But how did you overcome that? And how did you grow your business?
Well, that's a great question, because most people, right, when you get out of your little box, in your comfort zone,
it's scary.
It's scary. And you know what? And when you're having success doing this over here, and you come over here, and you're failing and failing and failing and failing, what's the easiest thing to do? Go back to what's easy, right?
It's like a rubber band. You just stretch back to what's comfortable, and sometimes what's comfortable is uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I remember when I started recruiting the first year, I used to meet with Vlad, monthly. And we used to go over everything. And I remember always kicking and screaming to him and telling him, I hate recruiting. I don't want to recruit. I want to go back to selling.
Did you feel like quitting at that moment?
Oh,
so many times.
All the time.
So what kept you going? What was that drive?
The drive for me was that I knew that this was what was going to be best for me.
Yeah.
Not my calling, but I knew this was what was going to be best for me. I also realized that I could only do so much as a one person, right?
Exactly. You hit like a certain threshold.
And I stuck with it. I made a whole bunch of adjustments. Me and him, game planned and made a lot of different things. We had nowhere near the budget that I have now, we had now. So we had to do we did everything on a bootstrap, right?
Yeah.
But you know what?
It worked out.
It worked out, and I was able to help him build 2 ISOs at that time, that did very well in business. And it also helped me because it showed me that, wow, all right, I can do sales, I can do recruiting, I can do business development.
Yeah.
So
you guys are a good pair. And it's also about finding the right partnerships and the right skills that complement each other when it comes to business partnership.
Look, in business partnerships, right, you always got to have people around you who are better than you.
Yeah.
Right? So I had Vod, who had been around the block and had done everything that I hadn't done yet, right? So I was just learning from him, right?
Yeah.
So everything was always about learning.
But he had faith in you as well.
Well, he had faith in me as well because I already had succeeded. And he also knew that, I was a guy that was not going to quit.
I have the shoulders for it. Let's do this together.
I showed him that I wasn't going to quit, right? And
that's a beautiful quality.
And that's a big
resilience.
thing.
So that's at a professional level. Obviously, we're all humans. And for everybody that is watching us, that is, want to start a business or grow a business, sometimes at a personal level, you can be, like married or with kids, or you have like a financial obligations. What is the advice you would tell people to just like keep going and, not to quit?
Look, I would say the biggest thing that you got to have is you got to have a big why.
Yes.
Why is it you're doing this? If your why is not big enough, you're not gonna have a reason to do the uncomfortable. You got to have a big why. You got to have a big goal. You got to have a big dream. For me, it was always my wife and my 3 kids. I wanted to be able to provide for them and give them the best lifestyle.
And it's a beautiful why.
And be able to meet all of their needs. And do all the things that I dreamed about. When I lived in that basement apartment in New Jersey, and I used to sit outside at 2:00 in the morning because it was too hot inside my basement and I didn't have an air conditioner, and I would sit outside just getting some air, and I would be saying, one day I'm going to have a house in Miami with a pool,
I would never feel
with air
like this
conditioning,
ever again.
And I had a big dream about where I wanted to go. I had a big vision about what I wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
And that big why and that big dream and having big goals, those are the things.
It gives you the hunger and the drive.
Those are the things that are going to give you the drive, but at the same time, you also got to have a game plan to be able to execute.
Exactly.
Because you could have a big dream and a big why, but if you don't have a game plan or a plan of action that you're going to do every day, you can't just do it based on hope alone.
Short term, for sure. So I admire your big why and respect it so much. And now that you've accomplished everything that you've accomplished, how can you keep feeding that ambition?
I would say, for me, I never want to be complacent. All right. I had complacency once in my life. In 2011, in 2007, I wrote on a page. I still have that notebook in my house. When I was at the lowest point in my life before I got back into merchant services, I wrote down on a page all the things that I wanted to accomplish. Crazy stuff. Like
a vision.
I wrote in there that I was going to buy a house pre-construction. I was going to make X amount of dollars. The dollars that I was going to make was like 5 times what I was making then, which almost seemed impossible, right? But everything that I wrote in there, I accomplished within 4 years, including that house, including buying pre-construction. And what happened is, when I bought that house and I moved into it, I didn't continue to write down my dreams and write down my goals. I became complacent, right? Yeah. And you become a little fat, right? Because you have residuals, you're making good, you feel
you get a little comfortable.
To you, you're doing good because compared to what you were before, where you are now, you feel like the king of the world.
But there's always a next level and room to grow.
And that's
impressive.
And that's the thing, right? Not being complacent. Yeah. I already know.
Never get too comfortable.
Never get too comfortable, and that's
anything in life. That's definitely.
And that's the thing that drives me. I don't never want to be complacent, And my goal every day is to get 1% better.
I like that.
My goal every day is to learn something new. That's why I'm always listening to stuff. I'm always trying to put good information in. I'm always trying to read good books. I'm always trying to see good videos. I'm always trying to see where I can get that edge that's going to make me better, and that I'm going to be able to share it with somebody else and help them as well.
No, I love that perspective, and it's very inspiring. And how do you measure success? So you're always growing. You're never complacent. You're not to say that you put pressure on yourself, not in that way, but how do you measure success in life and at Nativia?
The way I look at it is I'm a big goal person. I write everything down. Okay. Right now I have 4 journals that I write, and people might think I'm crazy.
I love that. I'm all about the law of attraction, journaling. It's so important.
I have one. It's for manifestations. I have another one where I write down my workouts and what I eat every day. I have another one where I just write specific.
Or like a gratefulness journal.
Right. Like there's days that I write about where I want to be in 3 months, where I want to be in a year, where I want to be in 3 years. What do I need to do to change? I have all these different exercises that I do.
Yeah.
And then I have another book that I write down everything that I do every day.
So you can reflect back on everything
that I do. So if I ever...
That takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to do that. And not only like write the good stuff, but be able to reflect back and be like, oh, wait, I think I need to adjust this and that. So that takes a lot of...
Yeah, and if you come to my house, come to my house, I have a stack of about 30 or 40 notebooks that I have been writing in, that I have for all the years that I've been doing this. And it's all there because it's all about...
And it's a reminder.
What that does for me is accountability.
Yes.
I'm accountable to myself.
I love that word.
Accountability. You know what? Most people aren't accountable to themselves.
Yeah.
What do?
Always blame the others.
Always blame, making excuses, or, they're saying that the market...
Blame it on their old self.
They say that the market is what you call... That everybody has credit cards, that nobody needs credit cards. You know what it is? It's thinking. If you have that mindset, forget about it. You're never going to be able to do anything. Okay?
No, it's true.
Because... there's
because
always...
that's not how you grow. It's accountability, and having all those notebooks at home just like reminds you of the old versions of you. Yeah. And how far you've come. Yeah,
and you know what? For me, I never want to go back to where I was. I remember my lowest points. My lowest points when I was down and out. When my wife would get home and there was no water and there was no electricity. When my car got impounded. All these things that happened many, many, many years ago. I never want to go back to that, and that's what drives me.
And you have to face that as well. It's like the pain never goes away, obviously. But when you transform that into something that drives you to become better, that's where the growth happens. And I love that you have that self-awareness too.
Yeah, look, and it's not just about growth. Yeah. It's growth. It is about growth. It's about growth in different areas of your life. Okay.
It's true.
It's growth in your spirit. In your relationship with your creator, whoever it might be. Yeah. I have my own creator that I believe in, Jesus Christ. Everybody has a different, believes in a different God, and I respect that.
Relationship with yourself.
Relationship with yourself. Your family, your wife, your kids. Yeah. The people that you work with. Yeah. Right. Your development in your personal and how you're growing as a person every day. Exactly. Right? Growing in business. Growing in yourself, in
your body,
in your body. I work out 5 days a week.
Nutrition and everything. I call that like having different love tanks. So you have to fuel each and every one of them differently. Yeah. There's no one rule.
Look, I work out 5 days a week. Yeah. One of my biggest challenges that I had was my eating, right? And now I'm overcoming that, and I'm making adjustments.
It's just adjusting. Exactly, it's all about fine tuning.
Fine tuning. Look, I had one of the worst habits. Okay, and the worst habit that I had was that before I went to bed every day at night, I had to eat something. And you know what?
And that's when you're not burning calories.
That's why. So now in the going on almost 2 months now, I have my last meal whenever it is 7:30, 8. And I don't eat anything till the next day in the morning. Before I go to bed, I have a glass of water, and I don't allow myself to eat. Yeah. So that for me is a big
achievement.
Win. It's a big achievement. It's something small, but it's big because you start making that change, and you make a change here and a change there.
And it's uncomfortable, but you have to stretch that
Yeah.
that comfort zone.
And when you do that, the hardest part is always the first day, the second day, the 3rd day. You
Yeah.
ask anybody who stopped smoking, when is the hardest? It's the first couple days.
It's
right?
true.
So
But they
everything.
say it takes 21 days to learn a new habit or 21 days to lose a new habit. But still, those 3 weeks feel like,
Yeah.
3 months.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom with us. And if there is anything they would like to tell or the ISOs at Netevia, as we're talking about your personal journey. Thank you for sharing that with us. What would you tell them?
I really believe that, personal development and personal growth is what has gotten me where I am. I don't do anything special. I don't think I'm the most talented person in the world, but I can tell you I am the most consistent person.
Consistency is everything.
I am completely consistent. And I also, I persist,
Yeah.
I keep on. There were days.
These are two of my favorite words: consistency and persistence.
Right.
Persistence?
Persistence. And persistence because, there was a lot of times where I was doing, everything that I was supposed to do and nothing was happening. And, I remember
And that
having
causes frustration.
And I remember having
Yeah.
those conversations with myself at night, having a cigar outside saying, what the hell is going on? I'm doing everything.
What am I doing wrong?
Why aren't things happening, But you know
then
what?
you remember your why.
You remember your why. And you also got to remember that, in success, it's like this.
Yeah.
Then you have valleys, then you go down,
it's
then
not
you
linear.
go up. It's not just like this.
Yeah.
And
That's why most people give up
a
along the way.
lot of people give up when
Yeah.
they're in the valley,
Yeah.
or when they get stuck down here, they can't get out. They can't go up.
Exactly.
So,
You can't appreciate the highs if you don't go through the lows.
consistency
It's
and
key.
being persistent and focusing on getting 1% better every day.
100%.
And another important thing is what you say and what you speak. Watch your words.
Oof.
Watch your words
That is
because your
powerful.
words have magic.
I totally
Your words
agree
can
with
either uplift you or destroy you.
Yeah.
It all depends,
On
on
what you decide.
what you say.
Exactly.
And what are you saying to yourself?
Yeah.
Because
If you say I can't, I won't,
you can.
I'm not able, then you are manifesting that into
already
your
manifesting.
reality. I totally agree with you.
Exactly.
And that is a challenge day in, day out, because sometimes you're frustrated, sometimes you're tired,
Yeah.
sometimes you're hungry
I remember I've had
or
conversations.
fearful.
I've had conversations with people that I know, and some of these people are successful, and you hear them talking
Yeah.
like, "Oh
How
my God,
did you get here?"
How did you get here? Look what you sound like. You sound like you have a little. You sound like you have a little
A
rain
little
cloud,
devil, like,
a little rain
sitting-
cloud walking around over your head. It's sunny outside, and you're walking around with a storm over your head. So those are the things you got to watch for. But you know
100%.
what? If you're focusing on becoming better every day, and you're working on yourself, and you're doing all those things, if you ever have any of those episodes, you're able to catch it faster,
Exactly.
and you're able to shift.
Thank you so much, Gus, for these beautiful words of wisdom and your perspective on success. I really appreciate you sharing this with us. And before we let you go, we'd like to thank you for following us. If you can like and share our page and subscribe, of course. And peace out. We'll see you next time.